The night shift at the old gas station off Route 46 wasn't supposed to be eventful. That's what they told me during training. Nothing ever happens out here, my manager, Joe, had said with a lazy grin. Just follow the rules and you'll be fine. I should have listened. It was my first night alone on the job. The station itself was a relic from the past. Flickering neon lights barely illuminating the cracked pavement, rusted pumps that wheeze like dying lungs, and an ancient radio behind the counter that only picked up static. The place reeked of stale coffee, motor oil, and something else, something metallic, almost like blood. The rule sheet was taped to the wall behind the register. A long, yellowed piece of paper with typed-out instructions in bold, black ink. The rules were simple enough at first glance. 1. Lock the doors at exactly 12:15 a.m. Do not let anyone in or out until 3:33 a.m. No exceptions. 2. If the payphone rings, do not answer it. 3. Never, under any circumstances, go outside after midnight. 4. If a woman in a blue dress knocks on the window, ignore her. 5. The security cameras will sometimes show people who aren't really there. Don't acknowledge them. 6. If a man with no eyes enters the store, offer him a cup of black coffee. He will leave once he finishes. 7. If you hear scratching from under the counter, do not investigate. I read through the rules twice, scoffing at their absurdity. This had to be some kind of initiation prank for new hires. Locking the doors at 12:15 a.m., ignoring customers, and the thing about the security cameras, ridiculous. Midnight came and went, and nothing unusual happened. A few truckers stopped by for gas. An old man bought a pack of smokes, and a woman with tired eyes and a baby on her hip purchased a bottle of aspirin. Normal. Boring. Then, at exactly 12:14 a.m., the air inside the gas station changed. The overhead lights flickered. The old radio crackled, a garbled voice whispering something unintelligible beneath the static. A wave of nausea rolled through me, and for a split second, the reflection in the station's front glass didn't match my movements. Then the payphone rang, a shrill, unnatural sound that made my teeth vibrate in my skull. I turned toward it, my stomach twisting. The phone was mounted on the far wall near the restrooms, its receiver dangling just a little too far from the hook, as if someone had just been using it. I stared at it, pulse hammering. If the payphone rings, do not answer it. I took a shaky breath and turned away, forcing myself to focus on the register. The phone kept ringing. Each shriek of the bell was sharper than the last, drilling into my skull, clawing at my sanity. My fingers twitched. Just pick it up, a small voice in my head urged. Maybe it's important. Maybe it's an emergency. My hand moved on its own, reaching for the receiver. Then, a knock at the window made me freeze. A single, deliberate tap. I turned slowly. A woman stood outside the gas station, staring in through the glass. She was tall and pale, her face eerily smooth, like it had been stretched too tightly over her bones. Her long, jet-black hair cascaded over her shoulders, but it was her dress that made my blood run cold. A blue dress. I took a step back, heart pounding in my chest. The rule flashed through my mind like a warning siren. If a woman in a blue dress knocks on the window, ignore her. She knocked again. This time, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. The payphone still rang. The air grew thick, suffocating. I felt something shift behind me, an unseen presence lurking just out of sight. The lights above flickered again, casting erratic shadows across the store's interior. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay still, to ignore her. A third knock, louder this time. I squeezed my eyes shut. No, I wasn't playing this game. The phone stopped ringing. Silence settled over the gas station, heavy and unnatural. I opened my eyes, hesitantly glancing at the window. The woman was gone. I exhaled shakily, my body still buzzing with adrenaline. My hands were slick with sweat, my shirt clinging to my back. A chill ran down my spine. I turned toward the security monitors, a lump forming in my throat. The cameras flickered, static distorting the feed. The image shifted, twisted, and then, there, in the grainy black and white footage, standing just behind me at the counter, the woman in the blue dress. Her face was too close, her lips inches from my ear. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing, just the empty store, the hum of the refrigerators, the distant croak of a cricket outside. I exhaled sharply, hands trembling. This was too much. I needed to call Joe, to tell him this wasn't funny. But as I reached for my phone, I heard it. A sound coming from beneath the counter. Scratching. A slow, deliberate scrape of nails against wood. I took a step back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The rule sheet flashed in my mind again. If you hear scratching from under the counter, do not investigate. But it was too late. I had already looked. The register counter had a small open section beneath it, used for storing cleaning supplies and spare receipt rolls. The space was dark, shadowed, but in that darkness something moved. A pale hand reached out, fingers too long, too thin, curling against the floor. A second hand followed, pulling something forward, something shifting in the darkness. Then a face, a twisted mockery of my own. Its hollow, sunken eyes locked onto mine, its lips stretching into a grin. I stumbled back, slamming against the display rack behind me. My lungs seized, a scream caught in my throat. The thing under the counter began to crawl out. My vision blurred. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like angry insects, and for a moment, the entire gas station seemed to tilt, reality warping around me. Then, the chime of the front door rang out. I whipped my head around. A man walked in, dressed in a long coat, his face obscured by shadows. The thing under the counter froze. I turned back, my heart hammering. The space beneath the counter was empty. The man approached the counter, setting down a crumpled dollar bill. "Black coffee," he rasped, his voice like rusted metal scraping together. I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then I saw it, his face, or rather, the absence of one. Smooth, featureless skin stretched over his eye sockets, his mouth a barely visible indentation. A memory surfaced. If a man with no eyes enters the store, offer him a cup of black coffee. He will leave once he finishes. Hands trembling, I grabbed a cup and filled it. As I handed it over, he nodded. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back out into the night. I stood frozen, my body still shaking. The gas station was silent again, but I knew the night was far from over, and I had broken the rules. Don't look at the security monitors after midnight. Don't answer the knocking from the storage room. Don't let the woman in the blue dress inside. I had ignored all of them. Now, I had to make it right. Slowly, I turned away from the figure. The gas station was silent, but it wasn't the comfortable kind of quiet. It was the kind that made my skin crawl, like the entire building was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The man with no eyes had left. The thing under the counter had disappeared. The woman in the blue dress was nowhere in sight. But something had changed. I could feel it in the air, thick, wrong, pressing against my chest like an unseen weight. My hands were still trembling as I gripped the counter, my knuckles white. My mind screamed at me to leave, to grab my car keys and speed down the highway until this cursed place was nothing but a speck in my rear-view mirror. But I couldn't. I had already broken the rules. And I had the sickening feeling that whatever was watching me, it wasn't going to let me go so easily. 1 a.m. I tried to keep busy. I restocked the shelves, wiped down the coffee machines, and checked the register totals. Anything to keep myself from looking at the security monitors again. The last time I had seen something that wasn't supposed to be there. But the gas station had other plans. A loud thud echoed from outside. I flinched. dropping the roll of paper towels I had been holding. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward the glass doors. There was nothing there. The empty lot stretched out into the darkness, the flickering neon sign barely illuminating the cracked pavement. Then another thud, louder this time. It came from the side of the building, near the dumpsters. I swallowed hard. Never, under any circumstances, go outside after midnight. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to stay put. But the noise continued, rhythmic, deliberate. Something or someone was out there. My pulse hammered in my ears as I reached under the counter, my fingers brushing against the handle of the old baseball bat Joe kept, just in case. It wasn't much, but it made me feel a little less like a sitting duck. The thudding stopped. For a few agonizing seconds, there was only silence. Then a whisper, soft, barely audible, coming from just outside the glass doors. I couldn't understand the words, but the sound of it crawled under my skin, made my stomach twist into knots. I took a step back, gripping the bat tighter. Then the whispering stopped. A slow, deliberate knock followed, not at the front door, at the window. My breath hitched in my throat. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't, but some primal, stupid part of me needed to know. So I turned my head, and my stomach dropped. The woman in the blue dress was back. Her face was pressed against the glass, her dark eyes locked onto mine. But something was wrong. Her smile was wider now, too wide, stretching unnaturally across her face, revealing rows of two sharp teeth. Her skin was splitting at the corners of her mouth, but no blood dripped from the wounds. She lifted a single hand and tapped the glass again. Tap, tap, tap. I stumbled backward, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. She didn't move. She just kept watching me, her head tilting slightly, as if studying my reaction. I squeezed my eyes shut. Ignore her. Just ignore her. The lights flickered again. A gust of wind howled through the vents, carrying with it the scent of something rotten. Then, the chime of the front door. My eyes snapped open. The door was wide open. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't unlocked it, and yet it stood ajar, the night air seeping into the gas station like an unwelcome guest. Slowly, I turned back to the window. The woman was gone. I didn't hesitate. I bolted forward and slammed the door shut, twisting the lock until my fingers ached. My chest heaved as I stepped back, my pulse deafening in my ears. But the moment my hands left the door, the payphone rang. I let out a shaky breath, turning toward it with a fresh wave of dread. If the payphone rings, do not answer it. I squeezed my hands into fists. My head was spinning, my nerves fried. This was too much. But then something changed. The sound of the ringing shifted. At first, it was just a normal, shrill tone. But then, slowly, it distorted. The pitch warping, deepening, twisting into something that sounded almost human. A voice, not from the receiver, but from the phone itself, calling my name, whispering, begging. I backed away, my legs trembling. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. Then I heard it, something moving behind me, slow, deliberate, a shuffling sound like bare feet on tile. I turned around and froze. The security monitors were flickering again, the static distorting the images. But this time, there was something new. In every single camera feed, a shadow, standing in the aisles, standing behind the counter, standing directly behind me. My breath hitched in my throat. The static grew louder, filling the gas station with a deafening hum. The lights buzzed, flickering wildly. The air turned ice cold. And then the whisper came again, right next to my ear. Why did you break the rules? The power cut out. Darkness swallowed the gas station, and something grabbed my arm. The power was gone. The gas station was plunged into absolute darkness, the only sound my own ragged breathing. My pulse pounded in my ears as something gripped my arm, tight, ice-cold, and wrong. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. The whisper still echoed in my mind. Why did you break the rules? A slow, deliberate breath brushed against my neck. Then fingernails, digging into my skin. I jerked away, stumbling backward into the shelves, knocking over a display of potato chips. My breathing was sharp and uneven as I scrambled for the flashlight under the counter, my fingers slipping against the smooth metal. I flicked it on. The narrow beam of light cut through the darkness, shaking in my unsteady hands. The gas station was empty. No shadow, no whispering voice, no freezing grip on my arm. But the moment the light passed over the security monitors, my stomach dropped. The feeds were back. Every screen flickered with static, the images distorted. But in the center aisle, standing completely still, was a figure. Tall, motionless, a void of darkness shaped like a man, but not quite. It had no features, no face, just a gaping, black absence where a person should be. And its head, it was tilted toward the camera, toward me, watching. The flashlight flickered. I clutched it tighter, stepping backward toward the register. My heartbeat thundered in my chest as I stared at the screen, praying the thing wouldn't move. Then, on the bottom monitor, the camera feed shifted. The figure wasn't in the aisle anymore. My breath caught in my throat. I scanned the screens, frantically searching. Then, I saw it, a new camera feed. The figure was now inside the storage room. The storage room directly behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, to get out, to forget the gas station, Joe, and every stupid rule I had ignored. But I knew if I moved too fast, if I made a sound, it would know. So I stayed still. Cold sweat trickled down my spine as I forced myself to breathe slowly, carefully. Then, in the silence, I heard it, a shift in the air, something moving, barely audible, behind the storage room door. Then, a slow, deliberate knock. 1, 2, 3. I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening around the flashlight. The knock came again, and then a voice, but not one voice. Many, a chorus of whispers, layered on top of one another, rising and falling like a sick, disjointed melody. My name, over and over, calling me, begging me to open the door. I shut my eyes. Don't answer. Don't speak. Don't open the door. I repeated the rules in my head like a prayer, willing myself to obey. The whispers grew frantic. The knocking became pounding. The door rattled on its hinges. The entire gas station seemed to tremble with it. I bit down hard on my lip, forcing myself to stay silent. And then everything stopped. The knocking, the whispers, even the flickering light of my flashlight steadied. For several long, agonizing seconds, there was only silence. Then, with a slow, creaking sound, the storage room door slid open. The darkness inside yawned open, deeper than it should have been. And in that endless void, 2 pinpricks of light, eyes, staring at me. I moved before I could think. I lunged toward the counter, fumbling for my phone. My fingers barely brushed against it when the flashlight flickered again, and the figure stepped forward, a leg, then an arm, moving unnaturally, like a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. It was tall, too tall. Its limbs were wrong, bending at sharp angles. I backed away, my breath coming in panic gasps. The thing tilted its head, observing me. Then, in that same chorus of overlapping voices, it whispered, "You don't belong here." I turned and ran. I didn't care where. I sprinted down the aisles, knocking over shelves and displays in my blind desperation to get away. But the moment I reached the door, I skidded to a stop, because standing on the other side of the glass was the woman in the blue dress. Her face was pressed against the door, her two wide smiles stretching impossibly across her cheeks. And she wasn't alone. Behind her, more figures emerged from the darkness. Dozens of them, silent, staring, blocking every possible exit. I was trapped. My mind was spiraling, grasping for a solution, an escape, anything. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The old metal ladder, leading to the roof. I didn't hesitate. I turned and sprinted, my shoes slamming against the tile as I reached the back of the store. Behind me, the whispers rose again. The storage room door slammed open, but I was already climbing. The rusted rungs of the ladder dug into my palms as I pulled myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. The moment I reached the top, I threw myself onto the roof, rolling onto my back, gasping for breath. Then a hand shot up over the edge, gripping the ladder. Then another, dark, claw-like fingers curling over the rooftop, pulling up shadowy figures one by one. My chest tightened. I scrambled to my feet, backing away until my heels hit the edge of the roof. The things kept coming, rising from the ladder, crawling over the sides, emerging from the night itself, surrounding me. I had nowhere left to run. The first figure stepped forward, its featureless face turned toward mine. Then, in that horrible, multi-layered voice, it whispered, "You broke the rules," and the darkness swallowed me whole. I was falling, darkness wrapped around me, thick and suffocating, swallowing every trace of light. My stomach lurched as I plummeted into the abyss, my arms flailing, grasping for something, anything, to hold on to. But there was nothing, no ground, no walls, no sky, just a vast, empty void stretching in every direction. Then, a voice. No voices. A chorus of whispers, overlapping, growing louder. He broke the rules. He must be punished. He does not belong here. The air turned thick, pressing against my lungs like a drowning weight. The darkness around me shifted, twisting into something alive. And then I hit the ground. The impact sent a jolt of pain up my spine. My breath came in sharp gasps as I forced myself onto my hands and knees, my fingers digging into something rough and cold. Concrete, the gas station floor. I was back inside, but something was wrong. The shelves were empty, stripped bare. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered erratically, casting long, twitching shadows. The air smelled different, stale, metallic, wrong. And the clock above the register. The hands weren't moving. Time was frozen. A shiver crawled down my spine as I rose to my feet, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I wasn't alone. Slowly, I turned. At first, I saw nothing, just the empty aisles, the lifeless security monitors, the doors leading outside, where a thick black mist pressed against the glass. Then, a shape, standing in the center of the store, tall, motionless, watching me, the faceless figure, the same thing I had seen on the monitors, the same thing that had been inside the storage room. I took a step back, my throat dry. It took a step forward. The lights flickered again. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Think. I had broken the rules. I had ignored the warnings. But maybe I could still fix this. Follow the rules. I took a slow, shaking breath and forced my voice to stay steady. I won't break them again, I said. I swear. Just let me go. The figure tilted its head. Then it spoke. The voice was hollow, echoing, layered with dozens of whispers all at once. A promise means nothing from a liar. A chill ran down my spine. The lights flickered again, plunging the store into darkness for a split second. When they came back on, the figure was closer, too close. I stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't some hallucination. I was trapped, a prisoner inside their world. And there was only one way out. Obey the rules. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. What were the rules? The ones I had broken? Don't look at the security monitors after midnight. Don't answer the knocking from the storage room. Don't let the woman in the blue dress inside. I had ignored all of them. Now, I had to make it right. Slowly, I turned away from the figure. It didn't move, but I felt it watching me. I forced myself to walk toward the storage room. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud against the silent walls. The door was still open, that endless black void beyond it, swallowing everything. I hesitated. I didn't want to go in, but I had to. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The darkness swallowed me whole. I don't know how long I walked. There was no floor beneath my feet, no ceiling above me, just the endless void stretching in every direction. And then a whisper, soft, almost familiar. Come back. A pinprick of light flickered in the distance. I ran toward it. The closer I got, the more the whispers faded. The light grew, pulsing, consuming the shadows. And then I fell forward, back onto solid ground. The gas station was normal again. Shelves stocked, lights steady, the humming of the coolers filling the air. I gasped, stumbling forward, my hands shaking. The clock above the register. It was moving again. I was back. A chime rang out. The front door swung open. Joe stepped inside, his face unreadable. He walked toward me, his eyes scanning me like he already knew. You saw them, didn't you? His voice was quiet. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Joe sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I told you, kid. The rules exist for a reason. I swallowed hard. What happens now? Joe studied me for a long moment. Then he pointed at my arm. I looked down, and my stomach dropped. A black mark. Not ink. Not a bruise. Something else. A brand burned into my skin. Joe's voice was grim. They won't forget you. And outside the gas station, in the darkness beyond the parking lot, the faceless figure stood watching, silent, waiting. The air in the gas station felt heavier after that night, like something unseen was pressing down on the walls, seeping into the floors, crawling into every corner of the building. But I stayed. I should have left. I knew that. But there were too many questions, too many secrets buried under layers of flickering lights and cryptic rules. And most of all, I wasn't sure I could leave. Not anymore. The next shift wasn't supposed to happen. I had the night off. Joe made that clear. Told me to lay low, get some rest, and try to forget about the mark he had burned from my skin. I planned to listen, but then my phone rang. It was Sam, the guy who worked the shift before mine. His voice was wrong, shaky, breathless. I need you to cover for me, man. I sat up in bed, my stomach twisting. What? Why? There was a pause, a long one, and then a whisper. They're here. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean? I demanded. Who's there? Static crackled on the line. Then the call ended. I shouldn't have gone back. Joe had warned me. Sam's voice screamed at me to stay away. But something about the way he whispered made it feel like he wasn't just calling for help. He was calling for me. The station looked wrong when I arrived. The lights inside were dimmer than usual, flickering erratically, casting longer shadows than they should have. The open sign in the window buzzed, but it was flashing too fast, like it was struggling to stay lit. And the door? It was open, just a crack, like someone had walked in and never walked out. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around my keys. I had two choices. Turn around, get in my car, drive away, or step inside. I took a breath and walked in. The second I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It felt like stepping into a different place entirely, thicker, like I was wading through something unseen. The store was silent. The hum of the refrigerators, the buzzing of the lights, even the faint rustle of wind outside gone. I stepped forward. Sam? Nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing, echoing too loud in the empty aisles. I moved toward the counter. The register was still there, the monitors blinking mindlessly. A half-empty coffee cup sat beside the scanner, steam still rising from the lid, like someone had just been there. I reached for the store's landline phone, but stopped, because that's when I saw it. The rules sheet, the one taped to the counter, the one I had seen 100 times before, the one with the same 10 rules printed in bold, black ink. But now there was an 11th rule, and it was written in red, like it had been added recently, like it had been added for me. My hands shook as I read it. Rule number 11. If Sam calls for help, do not answer. He is not Sam anymore. My breath hitched. I slowly turned to look behind me, and my stomach dropped, because Sam was standing at the end of aisle 4. He wasn't moving. Not at first. Just standing there, body rigid, his head slightly tilted, like he was listening for something. His clothes were the same as always. Jeans, work shirt, a name tag pinned to his chest. But his face, it was wrong. His mouth was stretched into an unnatural grin, too wide, the corners of his lips splitting. His eyes were rolled back, showing nothing but white. And his fingers, they were too long now, twisting and twitching, like they didn't know how to work properly. Then he took a step forward. I backed away, heart hammering in my chest. Sam, he didn't respond, just took another step, and another. Each movement was jerky, unnatural, like a puppet being yanked along by invisible strings. I grabbed the nearest thing off the counter, a can of energy drink, and hurled it at him. It hit his chest, and he didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't blink, just kept walking. But then he spoke. His voice was distorted, layered, like there were too many mouths speaking at once. You shouldn't be here. My blood ran cold. I bolted. I ran toward the back room, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands fumbled for the lock, twisting it just as something heavy slammed into the other side. A low, wet laugh crawled through the wood. You can't run. I staggered back, breathing hard. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything I could use, anything to defend myself. Then I saw it, the rusted key, the one Joe had used before. I grabbed it. My hands shook as I rushed to the hidden metal door, shoving the key into the lock. The second it clicked open, I threw myself inside and slammed it shut behind me. The stairs spiraled downward, deeper than before. Much deeper, and the walls, they were different. The symbols that had been etched into them before were now glowing, pulsing softly, as if responding to my presence. A distant whisper slithered through the air. I swallowed hard. Then I kept going, down, and down, and down, until I reached the bottom. And when I did, I wasn't alone. There, in the center of the chamber, a figure stood. Not Joe, not Sam. Something else. Something waiting. Something that had been expecting me. And as it slowly turned to face me, I realized I had made the biggest mistake of my life. The chamber was massive, far larger than it should have been. The walls pulsed with a dim, unnatural glow, the symbols carved into them shifting like they were alive. The air was thick, too thick, like something unseen was pressing down on my skin. And in the center of it all, the figure, tall, motionless, wrapped in something dark that shimmered like oil under dim light. It knew I was there, even before it turned, even before it spoke. You shouldn't have come here. Its voice was wrong, not loud, not deep, but layered, like it was speaking through 100 mouths at once. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back, and the door behind me slammed shut. My heart hammered in my chest. I turned, scrambling for the rusted handle, yanking at it desperately. It wouldn't budge. I was trapped. A wet chuckle slithered through the chamber. I turned back to face the thing. It moved now, slowly, deliberately. It stepped closer, the darkness around it writhing like something alive. "You broke the rules," it whispered. "You let him in." A cold realization washed over me. It was talking about Sam. Sam, who wasn't Sam anymore. Sam, who had called me for help. Sam, who I had answered. "What did you do to him?" I rasped. The figure tilted its head. "Nothing," it murmured. "Not yet." And then it reached for me. I reacted before I could think. I lunged for the nearest object, a metal pipe lying against the wall, and swung. The pipe connected, but instead of a solid impact, it passed through the figure's form like it was hitting water. The darkness rippled, and then wrapped around the pipe, pulling it from my grip. A cold, sick feeling crawled up my spine. It wasn't human. It wasn't even physical. "You can't fight me," the thing whispered. "But you can listen." It took another step forward, and suddenly, the symbols on the walls burned brighter. The creature stopped. Its form twitched like it was in pain. I didn't hesitate. I ran. There was only one way forward, a tunnel, carved into the stone, leading deeper into the underground. I didn't stop to think. I didn't stop to breathe. I just ran. The walls pulsed as I moved past them. The ground shook, the air turning thicker, harder to breathe. And then I saw it, at the end of the tunnel, a massive stone door, and in front of it, Joe. He looked worse than before. His face was pale, eyes sunken, hands clutching a knife that glowed with the same eerie symbols carved into the walls. He didn't even look surprised to see me. "You answered the call, didn't you?" he muttered. I swallowed hard. Sam needed help. Joe let out a bitter laugh. "Sam's gone, kid. That thing wearing his face? It ain't him anymore." My stomach twisted. I already knew that. I had seen it. Joe took a slow breath. "We don't have much time." He turned to the stone door. I noticed, for the first time, the massive chain stretched across it. "What's behind there?" I asked. Joe's grip tightened around the knife. "The thing that wants out." The ground shook again. A deep, guttural roar rumbled through the tunnel. Coming from behind me, I turned. The figure from before was closer now, its body shifting like smoke, the darkness around it stretching toward the walls, trying to smother the glowing symbols. It wasn't alone. Behind it, more shadows moved, more figures stepping forward, crawling from the walls, pulling themselves free from the stone. Joe cursed under his breath. "They're waking up." I turned back to him. "What do we do?" Joe lifted the knife. "We seal it." And then he stabbed it into the door. A blinding light erupted from the blade. The symbols on the door blazed, the chains rattling violently, slamming against the stone. The figure shrieked. The chamber shook. And then I felt it, a force pulling me back, like something unseen was yanking at my chest, dragging me away from the door, away from Joe. No! I tried to hold on, but the light swallowed everything. When I woke up, I was in the gas station, back behind the counter. The door was closed. The lights were normal. And Joe? He was gone. No blood, no knife, no sign he had ever been there. I turned to the counter. The rule sheet was still there. And beneath rule number 11, a new rule had appeared. Rule number 12. Do not go into the basement again. Joe took your place. I felt cold. I reached into my pocket. Something was there. A key. Rusted. Familiar. The same one that had unlocked the metal door. And in that moment, I realized something terrible. Joe hadn't just sealed the door. He had swapped places with me. He was down there now. And I I was next in line, the new night clerk, the one who had to follow the rules, no matter what, because if I didn't, I knew exactly what would happen, and this time, there wouldn't be another Joe to save me.